Hey everyone, how's it going? Sitting low, just coming at you, working on my 72 C10. What I'm doing right now is I'm doing the air ride install on it. And what I've been doing is, as I've been going along and doing the step-by-step, I've been just filming little portions of it, showing you guys the steps I'm doing and all that sort of stuff. But the problem is, once I started to go through all the video footage, I realized that with all the steps involved, this video is going to be over an hour long. So what I've decided to do is just kind of break it down into different steps. So this is going to be like part 1, and then there's going to be a part 2 and a part 3, just so that the video is not an hour and a half long. So this is going to be part 1, and part 1 is basically was me pretty much just stripping all the stock suspension off and pie cutting the uppers. So stay tuned for that. Hey everyone, how's it going? Sitting low here, just out in the garage working on my 72 Chevy C10, trying to install the air ride on. Well, not trying to, I'm actually working on the air ride system. Got my brackets, got my bags, and got everything I pretty much need. These are the brackets. This is the upper bracket for the front. It's got a cup for the lower. And I ordered this kit online through a company called Thor Bros. And they make really awesome parts. I am going to be using this upper mount. However, this lower cup, I don't think I'm going to use that. In order to get it to drop, I'd say that's going to be about my ride height right there. And I don't even have my 2-inch drop spindles yet. So once I get my 2-inch drop spindles, you can imagine the wheel will be, pretty much the rim will be tucked flush with the fender line. So once I get my drop spindles in, that'll make a big difference. But as of now, I pretty much got all the front suspension gutted and cut off, and just kind of taking measurements and seeing. Obviously all the ball joints and all that stuff's going to get replaced as well. But just taking some basic measurements off the rip, just to see how low it needs to actually go, and where I need to cut and what I need to do, because like I said, I won't be using these lower cups. These lower cups are designed to sit in the spring pocket, and when I mocked everything up and put the spring and the cup and the bracket in there and jacked everything up, I just was not satisfied with the amount of drop it gave me. It was with the spring cup and everything, I'd say that was probably as low as it would go, and I want to be at least 4 inches lower than that. So I'm gonna have to get creative. Take the lower control arms off, and what I was going to do is I was going to cut the lower control arm pretty much where that spring pocket is. I was going to cut that out, fabricate my own spring pocket, or I guess it would be a bag pocket, since we're not using the spring, we're using the airbag. So I just figured I'd show you guys what I'm working on. But it's coming along. I've only had this truck for, I don't know, two and a half months already, and got it turnkey, running, driving, wheels and tires. Got a new floor shifter, B&M floor shifter put in it, new retro sound radio. Truck runs and drives, and it's an awesome truck. So I'm excited to do the air ride on it, because that was my plan since day one, was to slam this thing onto the ground. And I thought it was going to be just as simple as bags and cups, and next thing you know, I'm laying the frame. But apparently this thing's going to need a little bit more surgery. A little nip here, a little tuck there, a little chop, cut, re-weld, and hopefully we'll be laying low. So stay tuned, you guys. Okay, so as of now, I've got about 25 inches from the center of the hub to the ground here. I'm going to say roughly 25 inches. Could be a 1/16 this way or that way, but let's just call it 25 to keep it simple. And I'm hoping that once I pie cut the upper control arms, I can hopefully get maybe 26 inches, 26 and a half, which would thus bring the wheel up a little bit more. And what I mean by pie cutting the upper control arms is where the upper control arm ball joint inserts into the spindle, you can make a couple of precise cuts and bend the upper control arm where it holds the ball joint and kind of correct the angle of the ball joint, and buy yourself another couple of inches of drop, and also, like I said, correct your ball joint angle so when you're slammed out, it's not putting a ridiculous amount of tension and pressure on your upper ball joint. So stay tuned while I start chopping into those, and I'll kind of give you guys an idea of what I'm talking about here. But like I said, right as of now, I'm just taking measurements. I'm looking at 25 from the center of the bore, hub bore, to the ground. And every inch I get above that is just going to equate into, you know, suspension drop. So I'm hoping to get about 26 and a half out of it. And then, like I said, once I get my 2-inch drop spindles, that thing will be tucking. Right. But the thing is, at the same time, I don't want to tuck too damn hard, because if you look underneath, there's my exhaust. So I can only really go so low. As of now, I'd say I got about another 2.5, 3 inches before I'm hitting the exhaust header on the ground. But, you know, depending on how low this sucker actually goes, I may or may not have to get a whole new freaking exhaust system. Starting with the headers, because if you can see in there, the headers are definitely what drops down the lowest. So this is just stuff you run into when you're trying to bag out a truck. You know, these things weren't meant to be slammed to the ground like this. So some applications are definitely easier than others, but for the most part, you know, expect to, you know, nothing on these things is bolt on. Even if I were to use these cups and brackets, I still had to cut the bump stops off of the lower control arms, and I still had to, you know, take the springs out, and I'm still going to have to do some modifications to the upper control arms and stuff. But for the most part, if you want it to lay, you got to start cutting, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So like I said, stay tuned. We're going to start chopping into the upper control arms, see if we can get this ball joint angle a little better, and then see if we can get some more drop out of it. So stick around. Okay, so with the wheel removed, you can kind of get a better idea of what's going on up here with the upper control arm. As you can see, this ball joint is completely wasted. That is original 1972 Chevrolet ball joint right there. So I'm actually surprised it's still intact as well as it is compared to the rest of the truck. Yeah, you can see it's all blown out. But anyway, as you can see here, the control arm comes out, and then it kind of lifts up right here to kind of make the ball joint parallel with the spindle control arm. Okay, which is all fine and dandy when you got a stock spring, stock pocket, stock everything, you know, when you're at stock ride height. But when you start going low, here, I'll try to raise it up for you. As you can see, the angle of this ball joint here, the lower you go, the more of an extreme angle it puts on this ball joint up here. As you can see, that thing is nearly 45 degrees. And that is as low, or I guess as high as the jack will allow me to raise this up. Because right now what is happening is the ball joint is completely maxed out in its one direction of travel, and it's binding right there. So basically what I'm saying is you only get so much pivot out of these ball joints before you have to start making some corrections, some alterations to make everything work. So what I mean by pie cutting the uppers is, you can see where it raises up here. Just kind of cut, and then I'm going to fold the ball joint pocket down a little bit just to help correct some of that angle. So let's go ahead and get going on that and see how it turns out. So I got the upper control arm removed. I brought it over here to my shitty vise. I mean, better than nothing, I guess. Oh, I just got a text. Anyway, here's what I mean by the pie cut. You see how I took like this little wedge cut right here? I also did the same on the other side, although I haven't cut the wedge out of that. But you can see what I kind of did here. Kind of drew an invisible line all the way across. Took my little pie cut out of there. I didn't cut all the way across. I just cut into where I would need to bend it. But anyway, cut that little V groove in it. Once I get the other side cut, theoretically I should be able to heat this up. Might not even have to heat it, just probably torque on it a little bit, but you know, theoretically once I fold this down, it'll close this gap, and then all I got to do is come in here, grind and weld, re-weld all this, and hopefully it'll correct that ball joint angle. So that's just to give you guys an idea of what I meant by the pie cutting. You can see it's kind of, they call it pie cutting because you're cutting out little triangle wedges, kind of like a piece of pie, I guess. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. I'll show you what happens when I'm done. So as of now, I've got the passenger side upper lower control arm pie cut. I didn't weld it up yet. I just pretty much put everything back together just to kind of mock and see how everything was going to work out. And I done got my 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches out of it. As you can see now, the rim is tucking right with the fender line. So I'd say that is right where I want to be right there, because like I mentioned earlier, any lower than that, I'm going to be dragging my exhaust header on the ground. So stay tuned. Pie cut uppers definitely made a big difference. Bought me another 2 inches out of it, and like I said, it also corrected that the angle of that ball joint up top. So you know, even though it's kind of sketchy having to chop into your control arm and do all this and re-weld it and rework it, you know, it's actually for the better in the long run. Because like I said, when you drop these things to the ground, you pretty much change every bit of factory, you know, factory geometry in it. So you pretty much got to re-engineer, rethink of everything, and you know, take everything into consideration. So yeah, coming along. I'm gonna pull it out, weld it up, and then reinstall it and call it good. And then I got to do the same thing to the other side, and next thing you know, it's time to chop into the lower control arms. Because like I mentioned before, I need to. I'm not using those lower supplied bag cups. I'm actually gonna just cut my control arms up, my lowers, and make a nice little, I guess you'd call it a cradle for it. But let's see if you can see what's going on up here. You might not be able to, it's kind of dark, but no, you ain't gonna be able to see shit. But seeing is believing here, so pretty much flush with the rim, and like I said, I don't even have drop spindles yet, so it's working out nice. And hey, it's starting to rain now. Awesome. So alright, I'm gonna keep grinding. Okay guys, so I just wrapped up the pie cutting on the upper control arms. As you can see now, the ball joint is pretty much parallel with the control arm as opposed to angling upwards like it used to. Gusseted it from the bottom and just, you know, filled in some areas and tried to grind it the best I could, so when it's all painted it'll look nice and almost look like it came from the factory that way. But I've already had them on the truck and ran the suspension through the motions and everything, and the ball joint angle and everything is perfect on it. So those are good to go. Those are ready to be, well, I got to replace these upper ball joints because, you know, if you're doing an air ride setup on your truck or your car or whatever, it's never a bad idea to replace all these worn out old ball joints, because the air ride suspension, the constant going up and down, it just puts a whole lot of stress and extra wear and tear that they were never designed to have. So moving onward to the lower control arms. As you can see, I've got both the lower control arms removed off the truck. The lower control arms are actually held on by these big U-bolts, which I just cut because this truck is a 72, so it's 2017. Let's just say it's 45 years old. Every nut and bolt on this truck has been fighting me the entire way, if you can imagine. I'm up in Michigan, and as you can see, we got rust on our stuff. So, like these upper control arm bolts, each one of these took me about half hour just to get them free. So multiply that times 4, it took me 2 hours just to get these freaking control arms off. And, you know, I don't got a big shop with a big monster air compressor or anything like that. I just got, you know, hand tools and whatever crap I got. So now that I got the lower control arm off, I can go ahead and start installing these upper mounts. Where they go, you just pretty much got to put them up there, drill some holes, mount the bag to it, and then bolt it right into place. Can't get much easier than that. This lower control arm, though, is going to be a whole different story. Like I said, I was initially going to use these cups, and these cups are normally designed to sit right down into that spring pocket like that, and which is all fine and dandy, but for as low as I want to go with this truck, that just ain't cutting it. So what I have to kind of do here is, you can kind of see what I'm doing. I just took a Sharpie and I'm going to cut all of this out of this control arm here, and it's going to be completely open there. And then I'm going to take some like 1/4 inch, you know, sheet metal and make I guess a tray or a cradle that you know, sinks down about 2 3/4, maybe 3 inches. I just got to get the specifications on the bag and what they are. Their collapsed height, I believe it was like 2.8 inches or 3 inches, somewhere along them lines. But anyway, I don't want to make it too low, and I don't want to make it not low enough, so I just got to take some measurements before I do any of that. So you kind of get the idea of what's going on here. You know, I'm not the first person to do this, so there's a few ways of doing it. A friend of mine did one on his 69 GMC. It was pretty much the same thing as a C10, but slightly different. He just took some large diameter, I guess, pipe, like 8-inch pipe, and made his own, I guess, larger spring cup to sink down in there. And that'll work, and that'll look fine, I guess. It'll work just fine, but I want to make these, you know, look almost like they came from the factory, like that. Sort of how I did with the pie cut uppers. Once those are reassembled and back on the truck, you will never be able to tell that those were altered in any way. So that's kind of what I'm going for. But yeah, it's coming along. It's moving, so stay tuned and I'll keep you guys updated as it goes along. But right now I'm undecided. What should I do first? Should I get the upper plates all drilled and mounted, or should I start cutting on these lower control arms? Both things got to get done, so I just got to kind of choose my battle at this point. It's starting to get kind of late out, so I might just hold off on doing those till tomorrow afternoon or something. But anyways, showing you guys the finished product on the pie cut uppers. The first one I cut, you know, I've never pie cut a control arm before. I've just seen people do it on S10s and whatever, and I'm going to tell you right off the rip, the first one I cut way too much out of it, but luckily I was able to make some filler pieces and fill everything back in. This one turned out much better. But, you know, the grinder and the paint indicate the welder that I ain't. So, like I said, once they're painted, they'll look fine. Anyway, stay tuned. Okay, so after standing around staring at these things for about a half hour, coming up with the idea I'd like to do with them, I went ahead and decided to start doing these upper bag mounts in the front here. I got the passenger side all drilled and loosely bolted into place, and it was just simply a matter of taking the bracket, the supplied mount, clamping it into place, getting under there with a punch or a marker or whatever, marking where your holes are, and then simply drilling the holes and bolting it in. Doesn't get much more simple than that. Just got to come over here and do the driver's side now. I got the driver's side, it's all clamped into place. Got my center punch, got my hammer. I like to start out with a little 1/8 inch pilot bit, and once the holes are drilled for the pilot holes, you can go ahead and use their bigger bit and get her done. So I figure why not just do these upper mounts, because they're not going to do themselves, and it only take, the one side only took me about 5 minutes. So go ahead and knock these out while I got access to it. It's really easy to do with no control arms or anything in the way. So just go ahead and burning them out. So that way that step is done, and then it's just a matter of making the cradle, lower bag, cup mount, whatever you would like to call it, for the lowers, and then the front can go all back together once it's all painted. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to come up with some kind of relocated upper shock mount, simply because the shocks that were on it were simply not designed to go that low. So unless I can find a really short shock, I think I'm going to have to do a custom upper shock mount, which ain't a big deal. I'd almost prefer using a custom upper shock mount. That way I can actually use a shock that has, you know, a good amount of stroke to it. Because, you know, on my my last Ranger, I only had X amount of travel in the front, and I had to get really short shocks for that, and that just limited the travel even more. And, you know, having that short shock also kind of made it ride real stiff. So, you know, it is what it is. But in the meantime, I'm just going through doing the steps, man. You gotta do the steps. So like I said, once those are done, do the lower mounts, paint everything, make it look really nice, reassemble it, and then the front's pretty much done. Other than the plumbing of the bags and whatever, and that, you know, that'll come when I'm ready for it. I haven't even touched the rear yet, so stay tuned for the rear, and we'll just keep going along, and I'll keep giving you guys updates. I wish I had like a GoPro or something and all that fancy camera shit that I could have, like, you know, speed lapse or whatever, time lapse of me building this thing for you guys. But, you know, I ain't got it like that. I just got this little old school, I don't even know what it is, Sanyo handy cam and a smartphone. That's about all I got. So doing the best I can, but anyway, I'm trucking along and making some good progress on it, so I'm just gonna keep going.